The galaxy was silent, but in that silence hid fear. For years the humans had been hunted, pushed back and broken. Their fleets were shattered, their colonies burned, their name whispered as if already dead. The great alien empire, spread across thousands of stars, had declared humanity extinct, but they were wrong. In the shadow of a dying red star, hidden inside drifting rocks and frozen dust, one last human dreadnought remained. Its black hull bore scars of 100 battles. Its guns were old, its armor cracked, but its heart, the human crew inside, still burned bright. The ship was called Resolute, though most now called it the Last. Inside its walls, the crew moved like ghosts. They knew the truth. No one expected them to return. This was not a mission of victory. This was a mission of memory. If they fell, they would fall loudly, so that the galaxy would never forget that humanity fought until the very last breath. Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge, his eyes locked on the holographic map. Blue dots, his ship, red swarms, an endless alien fleet. The enemy was coming. He knew the numbers. He knew the math. They could not win, and yet he whispered, "We will make them remember us." Around him, his officers nodded. They were tired, bruised, carrying wounds from old battles, but no one turned away. Some had pictures of Earth taped to their stations. Green fields, blue oceans, faces of children they would never see again. Others carried nothing but silence, holding their courage like a blade. The ship's engineer, Commander Lyra, checked the reactor core. It pulsed like a weak heartbeat. She reported, "We can give her one last storm, Captain. After that, nothing." "That's all I need," Kane said, his voice calm but sharp. The crew prepared. Weapons primed, shields charged, engines whispered. The dreadnought creaked like an old beast awakening from slumber. Outside, the star burned faintly, throwing red light across the black hull. For a moment, it looked less like a ship and more like a shadow of death itself waiting to strike. Far across the system, the alien fleet approached. Thousands of ships, bright and polished, brimming with arrogance. They laughed when they saw the single dot on their sensors. A lone human ship, hiding by a star. It was not even worth their full fleet. It was just prey. But deep inside their minds, a quiet unease stirred. The humans had always been different. Fragile, yes. Weak compared to galactic species, yes. But they were stubborn. Too stubborn. Every time they should have fallen, they had fought harder. Every time they should have died, they had found a way to strike back. That fear crept into the alien commanders as they closed the distance. On the bridge of Resolute, silence reigned. Every officer watched the numbers count down. The enemy would arrive in minutes. Kane looked at his crew one last time. He didn't give a long speech. He didn't promise survival. He only said 6 words. "You are humanity's last breath," and with that, the ship moved. Engines flared, pushing the dreadnought out of hiding. The Resolute turned to face the swarm head-on, alone against thousands. Its guns glowed, its shields shimmered, and in that moment, every crew member felt the weight of all who came before them. Soldiers who had died on burned colonies, children who had never grown up, voices of Earth that had gone silent. All of them lived now in this ship. The aliens jeered, sending messages across the void. "Run, little human. Run and die." But the dreadnought did not run. Captain Kane raised his hand. "Fire!" the ship roared. Missiles streaked out, cutting across the black. Energy lances burned holes through the first wave of alien cruisers. Explosions lit up the void, fire blooming like stars being born. The aliens screamed in confusion. How could one old ship strike so hard? But Kane knew. It was not the guns. It was not the shields. It was the will of his people, the weight of extinction, the fury of a species that refused to be forgotten. The dreadnought advanced, not away, but forward, its hull blazing with enemy fire. Shields cracked, alarms blared, but the ship still moved. Every blast shook its bones, but every blast was answered with fire. The Resolute was not running. It was teaching. And in that moment, the galaxy learned that humans did not know how to surrender. the first wave of aliens broke apart. Hundreds of ships turned, scattering. Commanders barked orders, trying to regain control. The lone human dreadnought burned like a torch in the darkness, screaming defiance at the universe. Inside the bridge, Kane whispered under his breath, "If this is the end, let it be an end they will never forget." And the dreadnought roared, louder. This was the last stand of mankind. This was where legends were born. The dreadnought Resolute shook as it fired again, its guns screaming through the void. Enemy ships burned, one after another, but still the alien swarm pressed forward. The bridge lights flickered, alarms echoed, and smoke coiled through the air. Yet in the heart of the storm, the humans fought on. As the crew braced themselves for the next wave, silence touched the captain's mind. Memories, faint but sharp, rose from deep within him. He remembered Earth, the smell of the sea, the sound of gulls, the laughter of his daughter chasing waves along a sandy shore, the taste of cold water from a glass in summer, the warmth of home, the hum of city lights at night. All of it seemed so far away now. A ghost pressed into his chest. Captain Kane closed his eyes for a heartbeat. That memory became a promise. He whispered so only he could hear, "This ship is not just metal. It is every piece of Earth we carry with us." Around the ship, echoes of the past stirred in every soul. In the engine room, Commander Lyra wiped oil and blood from her hands as she pushed her team harder. She remembered her brother's voice when he had gone to war and never returned. She remembered the silence of a burned colony where children had once played. Every cable she patched, every reactor surge she calmed, she did for them. On the gunnery, decks, soldiers strapped into firing chairs, eyes burning with tears they refused to shed. Each one carried a photo tucked into armor. A mother, a lover, a child. These ghosts whispered to them, giving them the strength to pull triggers even when hands shook. The dreadnought itself seemed to remember. Its walls bore scars, dents from plasma blasts, burns from close-range torpedoes. Every scar told a story of survival. Now, as power surged through its bones one last time, the old ship almost seemed alive, roaring with the fury of its people. Far ahead, the alien fleet hesitated. For the first time, they felt something dangerous. Not weapons, not numbers. Something stranger, something they did not understand. Fear. The humans were supposed to be finished. Yet here they were, one ship against thousands, still standing. Still fighting, still daring to advance. Alien commanders shouted to one another across the comm lines, their arrogance cracking into doubt. How are they still firing? How does one ship resist us? Back on the bridge, a young officer named Juno tightened her fists as she read the enemy signals. She whispered to the captain, "They don't understand us, sir. They never did." Kane gave her a faint smile, eyes cold. "Good. Let them keep guessing." The dreadnought charged again. Cannons roared, carving burning lines across the void. Another enemy cruiser split in half, its hull glowing before it exploded. The crew cheered, not with joy but with defiance, as if shouting back at death itself. Then the enemy answered. A wave of plasma torpedoes streaked toward Resolute. Shields flared, then cracked, shattering into fragments of blue light. The ship groaned as impacts tore across the armor. Explosions thundered inside the corridors, bulkheads buckled. Men and women screamed as fire rushed through broken halls. Still the dreadnought fired. Still the humans fought. In the chaos, Kane stood tall, gripping the command rail. His voice cut through the alarms. "We are not machines. We are not numbers. We are human, and humanity never bows." His crew roared in reply, a chorus that shook the bridge louder than the enemy fire. Through smoke and pain, the ship surged forward. It refused to drift. It refused to die quietly. Every blast it unleashed was a message carved into the stars. We are still here. The alien fleet began to waver. Captains argued, voices sharp with panic. They had brought thousands of ships, and yet this single dreadnought was carving a wound in their pride. Already hundreds of their vessels were gone. Burning wreckage scattered like shattered bones across the system. One alien commander hissed to another. "This ship fights like 10 fleets. What are these humans made of?" But no answer came. Because humans were not made of steel or flesh or fire. They were made of memory. The dreadnought pressed on, each strike fueled by voices of the past. The laughter of children, the silence of graves, the fire of promises that would never be broken. Inside the medical bay, nurses worked with bloody hands, whispering to the dying, "You are not alone." Soldiers gripped each other, knowing they had no tomorrow but still smiling through the pain. Even in the face of endless darkness, they carried the light of their people. Kane's eyes burned with both sorrow and fire. He knew they would not see Earth again, but he also knew something greater, that as long as they fought, Earth would live in memory. And memory, he thought, was stronger than death. The dreadnought, half-broken and bleeding sparks, roared into the heart of the alien fleet like a storm born of ghosts, and the galaxy watched in terror, realizing that this was no simple battle. This was humanity's echo. The past was alive again, and it was coming for them. The dreadnought Resolute moved like a wounded beast through the void. Its hull was cracked, its shields gone, and smoke poured from its vents, yet its guns still glowed, ready to roar again. Every heartbeat inside the ship was a drum of defiance. Alien fleet closed in. Thousands of vessels surrounded the lone human ship like predators circling prey. Their commanders watched with cold confidence. To them, this was already finished. A single ship could not break an empire's armada. But Captain Elias Kane had no plan to retreat. He stood firm on the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical map. He could see the aliens tightening their noose. He could feel the weight of every life on board, every hope of a species thought extinct. And still, his voice was calm when he gave the order, "Prepare the strike." The crew stiffened. Everyone knew what that meant. The Resolute had been saving its most powerful weapons, ancient launch systems and experimental cannons long forgotten by the galaxy. To use them now meant burning the ship's last reserves of power. Once fired, there would be no second chance. "Commander," Lyra's voice came through the comms, rough with exhaustion. "Captain, the reactors won't survive this. If we fire everything at once." Kane cut her off with steel in his tone. "Then let this ship burn bright. We are the last, Lyra. We do not die quietly." Silence followed. Then, one by one, voices across the ship confirmed readiness. Gunnery. Decks primed the heavy lances. Missile tubes loaded with warheads that hadn't seen daylight in decades. The plasma torpedo bays hummed with unstable energy. The dreadnought was ready to bare its teeth. Outside, the alien fleet advanced with mockery. Messages blared across open channels translated into human tongue. "One ship dares to face us? Surrender, and your deaths will be quick. You are nothing." Kane's reply was simple. He raised his hand, eyes blazing. "Fire!" The dreadnought screamed. From its battered hull, a storm of light erupted. Dozens of missiles shot out, their trails carving fire through the blackness. Lances of pure energy ripped across the void, tearing into alien cruisers before they even had time to raise shields. Plasma torpedoes bloomed like miniature suns, exploding inside tight formations. In a single volley, hundreds of alien ships vanished. Some tore apart in silence, others exploded so violently that fragments slammed into their own fleet. Chaos erupted as commanders shouted in disbelief. "Impossible! That ship should be dead! Pull back! Pull back now!" But it was too late. The Resolute had begun its dance of death. The dreadnought surged forward, diving straight into the swarm. Its cannons thundered in rhythm, each blast like a hammer blow. Enemy frigates melted under its guns. Carriers split apart as torpedoes detonated inside their hangars. Fighters swarmed, only to be shredded by automated flak that spat metal like rain. On the bridge, Kane's crew held steady, their faces lit by fire from 1,000 explosions. Juno, the young officer, whispered in awe, "We're tearing them apart." Kane's voice was harsh but steady. "Not enough. Keep firing. Make them bleed." And they did. Every strike from the Resolute carried more than firepower. It carried rage, grief, and memory. The ship was not just fighting. It was screaming, telling the galaxy, "We are not finished. We will never be finished." The aliens, once so confident, began to falter. Ships collided as formations broke apart. Their commanders argued in panic. None could believe what their sensors showed, a single dreadnought destroying wave after wave of their fleet. But victory was not free. Inside the dreadnought, corridors burned. Bulkheads tore open, sucking men and women into the void. Engines coughed black smoke. Reactor alarms wailed as systems melted under the strain. In the med bay, wounded soldiers lay in rows, whispering Earth's name as nurses fought to keep them alive. Even so, no one begged to retreat. Every crew member knew this was their place, this battlefield, this moment. The first strike was not just an attack. It was a message carved into eternity. When the firing stopped, silence fell for a breathless moment. The void was littered with wreckage. Thousands of alien ships still remained, but hundreds more were gone, reduced to ashes by one dying dreadnought. The galaxy was watching. Across countless worlds, across hidden channels, eyes fixed on the impossible. The humans had struck first. The humans had drawn blood from an empire. Kane looked out the viewport where the red star burned like an ancient. "Aye!" His voice was low, almost a growl. "They will remember this day." The crew, battered and bloody, answered as one. "Yes, Captain." Beyond them, the alien armada gathered again, furious now. They had been humiliated. Their pride demanded vengeance. Weapons primed, engines screamed, and the swarm prepared to crash upon the lone human ship with all its fury. But Kane did not fear. He gripped the rail and gave his final order for the round. "Then let them come. The first strike is ours. Now they will know what it means to fight humanity." And the dreadnought's guns glowed once more. The void burned with wreckage. The dreadnought Resolute floated in the middle of chaos, its hull glowing red from the heat of its own guns. Hundreds of alien ships were gone, scattered across the black like broken bones. For one shining moment, it seemed the impossible had happened. One human ship had forced an empire to bleed, but the tide had not ended. The alien fleet regrouped, their fury rising like a storm. Thousands of ships closed in again, forming rings of fire around the human dreadnought. Commanders barked orders in sharp alien tongues, their pride shattered, their rage demanding revenge. The swarm tightened, wave after wave rushing forward. On the bridge of Resolute, the crew braced for impact. Smoke drifted through the air. Sparks burst from the consoles. Men and women worked with bleeding hands, refusing to stop. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center, silent, his eyes fixed on the approaching swarm. "They're coming in all directions," Juno whispered, her voice shaking. "They should," Kane answered, his voice calm. "Because we're not running." The first wave struck. Plasma fire rained down, slamming against the dreadnought's cracked armor. Explosions tore through its outer decks. Fighters swarmed like insects, chewing at the hull. The ship groaned like a wounded animal, but its guns never stopped. Heavy cannons roared, vaporizing clusters of frigates. Flak batteries shredded enemy fighters, filling the void with sparks and wreckage. Missile tubes spat fire, each warhead finding a target, each blast lighting up the darkness. The dreadnought fought against the tide, drowning in the storm but refusing to sink. In the engine room, Commander Lyra screamed orders over the roar of failing machinery. Reactors pulsed dangerously, straining to keep the weapons alive. Her team worked with bare hands, sealing coolant leaks, welding torn pipes while fire licked at their boots. One engineer shouted, "We can't hold this." "Yes, you can," Lyra snapped. "Because if we don't, the galaxy will forget us. And I won't let that happen." They pushed harder, blood mixing with oil until the engines roared again. Above, the bridge shook. Juno cried out as sparks flew across her station, cutting her cheek. "Shields are gone, Captain," she shouted. "They were never meant to last." Kane replied, "We are the shield." The dreadnought dove forward, plowing straight into the heart of the swarm. Enemy cruisers tried to flank it, but the human ship turned broadside and unleashed its fury. Whole lines of alien vessels shattered under the blast. Yet for every enemy destroyed, 10 more appeared. Inside the medical bay, wounded soldiers lay across the floor. Nurses moved quickly, their faces pale but determined. One soldier, burned and broken, grabbed a medic's hand. "Don't waste your time on me," he whispered. "Get back to the guns. Make them pay." The medic shook his head. "Every life counts." But the soldier only smiled faintly. "Then count this one as given. Now go." With tears in his eyes, the medic obeyed, running back toward the gunnery decks. The second wave struck harder. Alien battleships, larger and heavier, moved into range. Their cannons lit the void with monstrous fire. The dreadnought's hull split in places, spilling fire and air into the emptiness. Dozens of crew members were lost in an instant, their screams vanishing into silence. Still the ship roared. Still the humans fought. Kane gripped the command rail as another explosion rocked the bridge. The dreadnought's lights flickered, dying, then came back weakly. He looked at his crew, their faces blackened with soot, their eyes still sharp. "They think numbers will save them," he said coldly. "But numbers can't crush will." The crew answered with a shout, their voices shaking the air. In the gunnery decks, men and women strapped into firing chairs continued their work, even as bulkheads crumbled around them. Fingers bled against triggers, but no one slowed down. Every blast from the dreadnought carried not just metal and fire, it carried the weight of an entire species. For hours, the tide raged. Waves of alien ships crashed against the human vessel, and still it did not fall. It was bleeding, broken, burning, but it was unbroken. Every alien commander watching the slaughter felt something they had never known before. Doubt. How could one ship hold against thousands? How could fragile humans defy them this long? The longer the dreadnought fought, the louder that doubt grew, spreading like poison through their ranks. But Kane knew the truth. The Resolute could not last forever. He could feel it in every shudder of the hull, every groan of the dying engines. Time was running out. He looked once more at the tactical map. Enemy ships pressed close, their weapons hot. His own ship was almost spent, yet his eyes burned with fire. "Then we fight until the tide breaks," he whispered. And the dreadnought surged forward again, its cannons blazing, its crew shouting with every shot, drowning in the storm, but never letting go. Against the tide, they stood. Against the tide, they fought. And though the galaxy thought humans were finished, the dreadnought taught them otherwise. The dreadnought Resolute groaned like a dying beast. Its hull was broken in 100 places, and fire spilled from its wounds. The void outside was a storm of wreckage, a graveyard of alien ships torn apart by human guns. Yet for every enemy destroyed, 10 more pressed forward. The crew fought on, but the cost was rising. Inside the engine room, Commander Lyra wiped sweat and ash from her face. The reactor core pulsed wildly, on the edge of meltdown. Sparks rained down as engineers screamed over the roar of failing machines. "We're out of coolant," one shouted. "Then use water, use blood, use anything," Lyra barked. "Keep it alive or we all die." A young engineer ran forward, hands shaking, and jammed a pipe closed with his own body weight. Steam exploded, searing his skin. He cried out but held the pipe tight. Another crew member tried to pull him back, but he shouted, "No, seal it!" "Seal it now." The others obeyed. The pipe sealed, but the young man slumped to the floor, burned beyond saving. Lyra clenched her jaw. There was no time for grief. She whispered only one word as she moved on. "Thank you." On the bridge, Captain Elias Kane stood firm as another wave of plasma fire slammed into the dreadnought. The ship rocked violently, throwing officers to the deck. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. "Portside batteries are gone," Juno yelled. "Then fight with starboard," Kane shot back. "But sir, there is no but. We fight with what remains." The dreadnought turned, its surviving cannons glowing hot as they fired into the swarm. Alien ships burst like shattered glass, their burning wreckage lighting the blackness. But the dreadnought's own armor split wider. Pieces of the hull drifted off into the void. Every victory came with blood. In the medical bay, nurses worked, on floors slick with blood. Wounded soldiers lay shoulder to shoulder, whispering prayers, whispering names of those they loved. A medic leaned over a soldier who had lost both legs. "We can save you, just hold on," he urged. The soldier grinned, weakly. "Don't waste morphine on me, Doc. Give it to someone who can still fight." And then he closed his eyes forever. The medic froze, tears burning in his eyes. But there was no time. Another scream called him, and he forced himself onward. Back. On the gunnery decks, a group of soldiers manned the missile tubes. The last of their ammunition was loaded, but the targeting systems were fried. The only way to fire was manual. One soldier looked at his friend and said, "We'll have to guide them ourselves." His friend's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Then, "Let's make it count." The two strapped into emergency pods, attaching themselves to the missiles. With grim smiles, they launched into the black. Each missile, guided by human hands, slammed into alien cruisers at point-blank range, tearing them apart in blossoms of fire. Their sacrifice cleared a path for the dreadnought to breathe. On the bridge, Juno's voice shook. "Sir, we're losing too many." Kane's eyes were hard. "Every death here buys life for Earth. Every life given is not wasted. It is remembered." The ship roared again, engines straining, weapons blazing. Yet Kane knew the truth. Resolute could not survive much longer. He turned to the crew. "We have reached the price of survival. It is heavy. It is cruel. But if the galaxy remembers us, then humanity survives. That is enough." His words struck deep. No one argued. No one begged. They simply worked, their faces set with steel. The Sauer alien fleet pressed closer, their massive battleships unleashing endless fire. The dreadnought staggered, bleeding sparks, but it still fought. The crew still fought. Every trigger pulled, every lever pushed, every breath taken was another blow against the tide. Commander Lyra reported again from the engine room, her voice hoarse. "Reactor is critical, Captain. One more overload, and we're gone." Kane answered without hesitation. "Then make it the biggest overload they've ever seen." Lyra gave a tired smile. "Aye, sir." She turned back to her dying machines, her hands trembling but steady. The dreadnought pushed forward again, carving its way through a cluster of alien battleships. Fire lit the darkness. Alien voices screamed over the comms, panicked, desperate. Why won't they fall? Why won't they die? But Kane knew why. Humans had already accepted death. Now they were fighting for memory, not survival. Another blast tore through the bridge, sending Juno sprawling. Kane caught her arm, pulling her up. She coughed, blood on her lips, but nodded fiercely. "Still here, sir." "Then keep fighting," Kane said, his voice like iron. The dreadnought blazed one last time, guns roaring, missiles flying, every ounce of power poured into fire. Enemy ships crumbled, their pride shattered, their fleets burning, but the cost was unbearable. The dreadnought itself was falling apart. Systems failed one by one, fires spread unchecked. Crew numbers dropped with every second, and yet no one surrendered. Because the price of survival was not living. It was fighting until you could no longer stand, so that others, somewhere, someday, would remember. The Resolute, cracked and burning, stood alone against an empire. Its crew gave everything piece by piece until there was nothing left to give but themselves, and still they fought. The dreadnought Resolute was no longer a ship. It was a burning skeleton drifting through the void, wrapped in fire and smoke. Armor plates were gone, reactors were screaming, and half its decks were nothing but torn metal. Yet even in ruin, it still moved forward, its guns still glowing, its heart still beating with human will. Across the battlefield, the alien fleet reformed. Thousands of ships remained. They had taken heavy losses, but they were still endless, compared to one dying vessel. Their commanders, enraged and humiliated, ordered a single command: destroy the human. But Captain Elias Kane was already ahead of them. On the bridge, sparks fell from the ceiling. Consoles flickered, some dead, some barely alive. Smoke filled the air, burning every breath. Crew members coughed blood but stayed at their stations. Kane gripped the rail, his voice steady even as death pressed close. They think this is the end, but it is not the end. It is the final strike. Juno wiped blood from her cheek, eyes blazing with tears. Captain, we have nothing left. Kane looked at her, then at his crew. Faces scarred, hands burned, eyes hollow from loss. But none had turned away. He felt pride deeper than words. We have one thing left, he said. Quietly, ourselves. The silence that followed was heavy, unshaken. Each crew member understood. The dreadnought could not survive, but it could choose how to die, and it would not die quietly. In the engine room, Commander Lyra pressed her hands against the reactor's console. The machine howled, unstable, moments from collapse. Her team stood around her, bruised and broken, waiting. She whispered, "One last push, one last light." On the gunnery decks, soldiers strapped themselves to broken chairs, loading whatever shells remained into half-destroyed barrels. Some laughed through cracked lips, some cried, all prepared. The dreadnought turned its nose toward the heart of the alien fleet. At the center of the swarm floated a massive warship, the Empire's pride. A world-killer cannon, capable of shattering moons, hummed with power. Its maw glowed, building energy aimed directly at the human ship. One shot and the Resolute would vanish forever. But Kane smiled grimly. "Not before we reach you," he gave the order. "All power to engines, all power to weapons. Brace for ramming speed." The crew roared in answer. The Resolute surged forward, shaking, screaming, engines burning themselves alive. The dying ship cut through alien formations, its guns blazing in every direction. Cruisers shattered under its lances, fighters disintegrated in walls of flak. Frigates exploded as the dreadnought rammed straight through their thin hulls. Aliens panicked. Commanders shouted in fear. Ships scattered, desperate to stop the blazing spear tearing toward their flagship. "Kill it, stop it now," they screamed. But nothing could stop it. Inside, alarms screamed louder than ever. The bridge shook violently. Fires spread uncontrolled. Men and women fell, some never rising again. Yet those who remained still worked, their hands steady even as the ship burned around them. Juno clung to her station, voice hoarse. "Captain, the flagship's cannon is charging. We'll be hit." "Before we reach them!" Kane stared ahead, eyes hard as steel. "Then we reach them before it fires." The ship accelerated faster and faster, tearing itself apart with every surge. Panels blew, engines burst, and still it roared forward. The crew screamed, not in fear but in defiance. At that moment, the alien flagship fired. A beam of pure destruction lanced through space, striking the dreadnought's side. Metal vaporized, whole sections of the ship ripped away. Dozens of crew were lost in an instant, but the dreadnought did not stop. Through fire, through death, through the crushing weight of annihilation, Resolute kept charging. Its guns lit up, one last time, pouring every ounce of power into the swarm. Missiles exploded in brilliant chains. Lances tore through battleships. Plasma blasts ripped open the flagship's shields. The dreadnought was dying, but it was killing as it died. "The engine room," Commander Lyra screamed. "Core breach in 10 seconds. On the bridge, Kane stood tall, unshaken. "Hold steady. Aim for their heart." The dreadnought slammed forward, closing the final distance. The flagship loomed ahead, massive and proud, glowing with its world-killer weapon. Kane whispered the last words his crew would ever hear. For Earth, for humanity, for memory. The Resolute crashed into the flagship. At that exact moment, its reactor went critical. The explosion was not just light. It was a sun being born. Fire consumed the flagship, tearing it apart from within. Shockwaves ripped through. The alien fleet, scattering ships, burning hundreds in an instant. The galaxy itself seemed to tremble. And when the fire cleared, there was nothing left of the human dreadnought. Silence fell across the battlefield. Where once the aliens had laughed at human weakness, now they stared into the void in horror. Their flagship was gone. Thousands of their ships lay broken, and all of it had been done by one lone vessel, by humans who refused to surrender. The dreadnought had taken its final breath, but that breath had been enough to shake an empire. The fire was gone. The dreadnought Resolute was no more. Where it had stood, only silence remained, a silence filled with ashes, wreckage, and fear. The alien flagship had been ripped apart, its mighty world-killer cannon reduced to glowing shards drifting through the void. Hundreds of alien ships were destroyed in the blast, their pieces scattered like burning stars across the battlefield. The Empire's proud fleet, once endless, now looked broken, confused, and terrified. And yet, no human ship remained. Not a single heartbeat of the crew survived the final strike, or so it seemed. Across the galaxy, signals raced faster than light. The battle had been witnessed by spies, traitors, soldiers, and civilians. Every sensor, every eye, every listening ear had heard the last scream of humanity's dreadnought. And with it, something began to change. On worlds ruled by the alien empire, whispers spread in dark corners. The humans are not gone. Farmers in distant colonies, miners under frozen moons, servants in great alien palaces, all heard the story. One ship against thousands. And it had not begged for mercy. It had not fled. It had fought until the last breath. And in doing so, it had torn open the pride of an empire. The aliens tried to silence the whispers. Their leaders called the humans reckless, cursed them as savages, tried to erase the recordings. But it was too late. Legends move faster than lies, and the legend of the dreadnought burned brighter with every retelling. Children of other species played games where they pretended to be human captains, shouting, "For Earth," before charging into imaginary battles. Soldiers of alien armies began to feel unease when they thought of facing humans. Commanders studied the wreckage again and again, searching for answers that never came. How did one ship stand against us? What gave them such strength? What if more still remain? On the shattered battlefield itself, alien scavenger crews drifted through the wreckage. They found twisted human helmets, torn armor, fragments of consoles burned beyond repair. Yet among the debris, they also found something else, an intact metal plate from the dreadnought's hull. Burned into it were the words, still clear, "Resolute," until the last breath. That piece of metal became a relic. Even aliens who hated humanity looked at it with silent respect, some with fear. To them, it was not just a plate. It was proof that humans were not like other species. Proof that when all others surrendered, humans fought until the very end. In secret places, survivors of scattered human colonies, those still hiding in the galaxy, heard the tale. Tears filled their eyes as they realized what had happened. The last dreadnought had fallen, but it had not fallen in vain. It had carved humanity's name into eternity. One hidden colony on a jungle world lit a bonfire that night. An elder stood before the flames and told the children, "They think Earth is gone. They think our people are finished. But remember, this one ship shook an empire. One ship lit the stars with fire. That is who we are, never forget." The children listened with wide eyes. For them, the dreadnought was not just a story. It was a promise that they too would rise one day. Back in the alien empire, fear began to spread among the rulers. Generals gathered in great halls, their voices uneasy. "If a single human ship can do this," one whispered, "what happens if more survived?" "They didn't," another snapped, but his voice trembled. "They couldn't have." Yet doubt poisoned their minds. They began to hesitate, to fear shadows. Every unexplained sensor blip, every flicker of movement in deep space, they wondered, is it another human ship? Is it them? The galaxy itself changed that day. No longer was humanity seen as weak prey. No longer were they dismissed as extinct. Now, humanity was a legend. A people who fought not for victory, but for memory. A people who would rather burn than bow. On the bridge of the Resolute, no voices remained. Yet in the silence of the stars, it felt as if the echoes of the crew still lingered. Their last words, their last roars, their last defiance, it all lived on, carried in the whispers of those who had seen. Captain Elias Kane's name would never fade. To his crew, he had been a leader. To the galaxy, he became a symbol, the man who stood against the tide, the man who charged into death not for himself, but for the memory of Earth. And though Earth itself was quiet, its people scattered and hunted, the galaxy now trembled at the thought of their return. Because if one dreadnought could shake an empire, then what could a fleet do? The answer spread like fire. The humans were gone, yes, but the legend of their last stand was alive. And legends once born never die.